Now we come to the heart of this program, the informal conversation with the President, which will take its form of in the question and answer. And those members of Focap only can ask questions. And there are two microphones there, members, one here and one the other one. And to save time, please stand. So we will not be wasting the time. But first, I'd like to open the questioning with one of our officers. Gurley, would you like to ask the first question?
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Sir, the stimulus package that you announced, what impact do you think this will have on the economy? Will this package ensure that we will be meeting growth targets despite the slowdown?
Well, this adds to the effort to be able to reach the growth targets, but at the same time, the global economic situation is changing practically daily. And one is not isolated from the world economy. Therefore, things that we do here domestically will impact our economy positively, but at the same time, we are not sure exactly what the negative effects of the world's economic turmoil will have on us, since it is still a developing story. But 72 billion will have its own multiplier effect, and this primes the economy to that extent.
Just one follow-up. Sir, are we prepared to announce another stimulus package if need be?
No, this is not wishful thinking. This is what can be supported by the savings, number one. Number two, this is also envisioned as goes hand in hand with the capacity to absorb by the different agencies that will be utilizing the funds. So going beyond that might not be productive at this point in time.
Thank you.
Yes, John, go ahead.
Mr. President, one of the props of the economy that was expected to be in place by the second half of the year was the PPP program. And obviously some of the spending measures that you've announced will compensate for the fact that that's not up and running. But when do you expect that PPP, with the long-term benefits, will actually be up and running and the investment happening?
What was the first project for January? I think it's supposed to be actually not awarded by January. Yes. Yung not running is, I think, not exactly correct. The Daang Hari project is actually on stream and should be bidded out by January, or awarded rather by January. The bidding, I understand, has already commenced. Next to that will be the NLEX-SLEX interconnection, the DOH PPP project for vaccines, and the public school buildings. But the first that will be bidded out, well, actually awarded out by January of next year, will be the Daang Hari SLEX connector.
You want to follow up?
Yeah. But some of those projects were due to be bidded out this year, and I'm wondering, is it the absence of that that's contributed to the slowdown?
Sorry, absence of?
Is it the fact that the projects aren't already bidded out and work hasn't started on them yet? Is that part of the reason behind this extra spending?
No, the funds are there, there is savings, but some of the agencies were not able to fully utilize. Hence, there's savings. Amongst the items that were not utilized were the positions for plantilla positions not filled up. That by itself amounted to something like 30 billion pesos. And it would be foolish on our part to have this appropriation already authorized by Congress and not utilized for the benefit of growing the economy.
All right, John? Fine. The first question, will you identify yourself, John, please?
Jonah from Asahi Shimbun. A Japanese NGO has been collecting the remains of slain World War II soldiers.
Okay.
And we believe that Japan has already provided the English translation to the Department of Foreign Affairs. And I would like to get your views. What do you think of the result of their investigation, if there were indeed Mangyan and Ifugao bones that contaminated the bones that they've collected?
I've yet to receive the transmission from the DFA, but my understanding is the results were inconclusive. But I would like to see the formal report transmitted by the DFA.
So, inconclusive.
That is the raw report that I got prior to seeing the formal report.
Sorry, inconclusive that they cannot determine if there were Filipino bones or the bones were purely Japanese?
Inconclusive means that precisely, that they are not able to determine. But that is raw. I would like to see the report coming from the DFA.
Yeah, but would you prefer that Japan conduct another set of tests to make the investigation more conclusive?
Ma'am, I'm speculating on things that I've yet to see.
Okay, next one. From there. O sige, dali. Go ahead. Wait, Dana. Go ahead.
Sir, good morning. Ron Kalunsat from Kyodo News. Sir, are you concerned of possible withdrawals by foreign investments, especially in mining, following the NPA attack in Mindanao last week?
Thank you for asking that. I actually met with officers of Sumitomo Group who called on me yesterday, if I remember correctly. And they assured us that they have no intentions of pulling out. There was that request for beefed up security in their areas of operations, to which we had already advised them of the corrective actions that are being undertaken. So if the main, shall we say, victim of this whole issue has not indicated a lack of interest or a lessening of interest, then perhaps I don't foresee any other foreign investors undertaking this.
So just a follow-up, sir. There are criticisms about the plan of the military to train special CAFGUs to serve as security for these mining industries. They're saying that this could be another creation of private armies. What do you say to these comments?
The special CAFGUs will be under the supervision of our armed forces of the Philippines, and there are other units that will be assigned to the PNP. They are not, how should I put it, in the control of private citizens. No? And it takes care of a very basic need. We have 250,000 roughly members of our men in uniform. They are guarding close to 100 million Filipinos. That is the exact same number of forces we had in 1986 when we had 50 million Filipinos. So we're asking the members, our citizens who are in uniform, to do double the work. And I think that would be unfair. CAFGUs or special CAFGUs will be territorial based, will be subject to all the rules and regulations, will be under the watchful gaze of our Commission on Human Rights Chair, Reta Rosales. And we do not foresee any abuses from them, but rather they will augment the abilities of our security forces to preserve peace and order in our country.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. President. I'm Melo Acuna from China Radio International. There was this incident involving Secretary Llamas. Would you care to tell us your views about peace and order? Because for a cabinet secretary to possess an AK-47 may not bring good signals to foreign and local businessmen. Thank you, Mr. President.
Well, Secretary Llamas has had several incidents that he has reported to the police in particular. Amongst them that there were people allegedly trailing his children. There were people sighted in the vicinity of their house that were not identified. Mm-hmm. And he's involved in so many negotiations, as you know. There are people who would not want these negotiations to prosper. Mm-hmm. That therefore, after the evaluation, it was determined that there was a very real threat on him. The right to self-defense is enshrined in our Constitution and even to the churches that we belong to.
Mm-hmm. Mr. President, allow me to ask you another question. Have you come across the recommendations of the maritime legal experts who met in Manila some time ago about the West Philippine Sea issues?
We still have to discuss the findings after that, but I understand that they've been mostly supportive of the position that we have adopted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead. Just a minute. Christine, Dario, and John, I'll be asking you to come to the microphone. Huh? Go ahead.
Yeah, Charmaine of NHK. Sir, I'd like to follow up on the question of Melo on the West Philippine Sea and the Maritime Legal Experts meeting. It seems that after the conclusion of that ASEAN Maritime Legal Experts meeting in Manila, it seems to us that the Philippine proposal for a zone of peace, freedom, friendship, and cooperation in the South China Sea has a long way to go. They have just recommended that it will be elevated to the SOM, and then for the SOM to endorse it to the foreign ministers, and for the foreign ministers to endorse it to the leaders. The ASEAN way is like giving us a setback here on the proposal. So where do you go from here? How would you still push forward with this proposal, or will you come up with something new?
The Code of Conduct itself, or the Declaration of Principles, was in 2002. So we're now 9 years after, and at least this thing is moving. And we have committed to ASEAN centrality with regards to handling any, shall we say, multilateral talks. So I think we are on track. There is a need for consensus. We are a very diverse group of 10 countries that have various parochial concerns, but at least the agreement to move this along is, I think, a very significant step, even at this point in time. Then, as I said, perhaps it will be best if the Secretary of Foreign Affairs will give you the details, but there are other options with regards to how to handle the West Philippine Sea issue.
So would that option still include going to the ITLOS and 4 other options that may be made available to us?
I've answered the ITLOS question in the previous fora. There is a need for China to agree to joining us when we bring it to ITLOS as part of the pertinent provisions of UNCLOS, if I'm not mistaken.
Sir, I was very specific with the zone of peace, which is different from the declaration of the Code of Conduct, because we propose this so that we will identify a specific area where the DOC or the Code of Conduct can be applied. So like a joint cooperation area, but this has not been very well accepted. How do you go? How will you proceed with your proposal then?
Why do you think it's not been very well accepted? We think it's the reverse, no? There has been an agreement as far as we're concerned with our ASEAN brothers. But again, the fundamental question with regards to China and the 9-dash line and incompatibility with UNCLOS is still there. No? And I think the focus should be that we are not escalating tensions to the point that conflict becomes a logical conclusion. Adherence by all parties concerned to declaring a zone of peace is, I think, a very healthy development and refocuses everybody on how best to resolve this without resorting to any untoward violent incidents. And that, I think, is an achievement by itself.
Just one last follow-up, Mr.
Go ahead.
Focap. As you mentioned in your speech that you'd like to see an increase of trade with China. In which areas would you like to see Chinese investments? Would it also include energy, oil and gas exploration? And how are we going to deal with the issue of the territorial dispute with them?
Thank you for the questions. Those are the questions that I'm also asking myself. Now, if you have not resolved territoriality, questions of royalty will also come in. Who gets what royalty? And how do we justify it to each of our peoples? And of course, I'm limited also by the Constitution that I have sworn to uphold and defend. So that, in terms of energy exploration in the West Philippine Sea, I think the issue of who owns what has to be resolved first. Okay. Now, with regards to other investment areas, and when we did go to China, we did agree that this is but one part of the relationship with them. There is a commitment, for instance, to help us with our tourism industry. There are 2 major travel agencies, one of which owns its own airline, and the other one is actually building 2 hotels already in the Philippines. So the commitment to help us in our tourism industry is not just words, no, but they're actually undertaking it. There are other ventures, heavy equipment and truck manufacturing is also set to commence also with us. There is a whole slew of investors that are coming in, apart from energy. But they would also want to help us in terms of our energy, our water resource management, our disaster risk mitigation, and we welcome all of this assistance.
So, sir, again, what was your guideline on the energy exploration aspect of an investment from China? Would you rather put that on hold pending territorial disputes? How would you like to?
And you're talking kasi energy only in terms of gas or oil in the disputed areas. And perhaps even what we considered previously not disputed areas. But there are energy concerns, for instance, in refortifying the national grid. That might be one of the venues for the more investment. So generation was also talked about. Renewable energy was also talked about.
but definitely not on Reed Bank, where Felix, I think, would be open to a joint development with Chinese companies.
Well, as I said, I'm thinking out aloud. Okay? The state that will grant the authority will be entitled to royalties for its people, and that comes from sovereignty over a particular territory. One, if it's in dispute, then who actually gets the royalty? If we agree to share of the royalty, that is a diminution of sovereignty, and I don't think the Constitution allows me to diminish our sovereignty.
Thank you.
Okay, next, go ahead. No. The gentleman, and then you, Marga. And then you, Christine.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Morning, Joel.
Sir, what steps are we taking to ensure that this stimulus package will be spent fast enough? Because this year we had problems with spending.
What steps are we taking? Well, amongst them, no, I keep talking to various cabinet secretaries and inquiring the status of major projects that are in their purview. For instance, I asked Brother Armin yesterday the status of the school building program, because we have something like 8,300 targeted school buildings this year, or classrooms this year. There is a deadline of December. I was talking to the NHA general manager about three days ago, inquiring on the status of the 21,000 plus houses that we promised the AFP and the PNP. And I was surprised that because of La Nina, it will be delayed by about a month, to January 15, 2012 for completion. But basically, I gave instructions to the DBM secretary precisely to monitor the expenditures, to beef up the reporting systems that are already in place. We were actually discussing the nitty-gritty of the reporting requirements. How long does it take to funnel up the stream to get reported to the DBM central office? And I'm told that in a lot of cases, from release, it might take about a month before various reports are generated. So the Secretary of the Budget, the Secretary of Finance, have been instructed, and NEDA have been instructed to review the entire system of reporting, so that if there are any slippages between releases and expenditures, then this be reported at the earliest possible time to correct whatever deficiencies are happening. This was a meeting held about 2 days ago.
Sir, with this stimulus spending, how will this impact on our deficit next year? Is there a chance that we might overshoot the 286 billion cap?
The spending is spent this year, so it cannot affect the deficit of next year.
So there will be no impact, sir, even if we have this 72 billion?
It's measured by when it's obligated. It will be obligated this year. Therefore, it impacts on the deficit for this year.
For next year, sir?
This year.
This year.
Yeah, let me reiterate, it's 72 billion that is authorized to be released from savings in the national budget this year.
Yes, sir.
To be spent this year.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Therefore, it shouldn't impact on the deficit next year, because our fiscal year is January to December, as you know.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Marga.
Morning, Mr. President. Marga Ortigas, Al Jazeera News. Reports come out today that Vietnam and China have signed a bilateral agreement setting down principles on how to resolve maritime issues, particularly in relation to the Spratlys. And this is obviously on top of whatever discussions are going on with ASEAN at the moment. Is this something the Philippines is also planning to do, some sort of separate agreement with China, just to move things a little further along in terms of talking peace in those disputed islands?
But we've committed to ASEAN centrality on this issue. So at the minimum, it should be also with the other countries in dispute. Our position is a multilateral solution is best, in that a dispute not settled wholly will not be a settlement.
How then will this affect the ASEAN program at the moment, with Vietnam signing one separately with China?
I understand that the Vietnamese president is scheduled for a state visit rather soon. It will be one of the topics that I will discuss with the Vietnamese president. And we have had previous discussions with the previous Vietnamese president, and I think we are aligned as to how to resolve the issue.
Included in the president's visit from Vietnam, will you also be discussing the problem of illegal fishermen, considering over 100, I think, have just also been deported back to Vietnam, and obviously this is a continuing problem?
Well, we have made representations with them that we have been lenient. They have violated certain of our laws. The judge gave us leeway in the interest of fostering better diplomatic relations, no, to not subject them to the sentences imposed. But we have made representations with the Vietnamese government that this cannot continue. But at the same time, we understand that most of these fishermen have been fishing in the so-called disputed waters between China and Vietnam, and we would like to adopt also a humanitarian way of trying to resolve the issue, but not at the expense of our fishermen or our flora and our fauna.
Sir, jumping onto something else,
Okay.
going
Jordan.
to the peace process, how optimistic are you still that you'll be able to resolve both conflicts with the communist insurgents as well as the Moro Islamic Liberation Front by the end of your term, considering where both talks are at the moment?
There is no cause for me to change my opinion that we will achieve a peace settlement with both. As to the details, I am not at liberty to discuss all of it at this point in time, given the fact that there are those quarters that would not want us to achieve peace.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. After Christine, it's Jim and Riza. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. President. I'm Christine Ong from Channel News Asia. We're doing a series recently on our station on a culture of entrepreneurship, and one of the things that our neighbors seem to be asking is, does the Philippines have a culture of entrepreneurship, considering that every year millions of our Filipinos leave the country. We understand that you just launched your 2 billion reintegration program. We just want to know, is there any other plans along the pipeline that will really entice our Filipinos to come and stay and do business here and become entrepreneurs? Because talking to the Reintegration Center, they seem to have a very nice program on the reintegration, 2 billion reintegration program.
That's one of them. There is of course, we have one of the resources of the state have to be really focused on those who have least in our society. Therefore, there's heavy emphasis also on microfinance to generate the entrepreneurial abilities. There are proposals, for instance, to develop a bank for the OFWs in particular as a way of tapping their resources and generating the necessary capital for various things that we do need here. There's something very grassroots in Nueva as a way of example. They use Carabao's milk to address our dairy insufficiency, our dairy needs insufficiency. And the capital used to purchase the Carabaos are, I understand, sourced partly from OFWs who are their partners in getting these assets into the hands of cooperators who turn the milk into either various dairy products. But over and above that, we're also investing in the education sector, number one, to be able to provide the opportunities for even advanced studies present in the country rather than having them go to various other countries like America, for instance, or Europe to further their studies, amongst them. I don't think I can go into that, but we're reviewing that particular area of study. But the issue is basically getting them the necessary endowments and research facilities to be able to conduct their studies here rather than go abroad and have it patented there and have us encounter more difficulties in trying to utilize the same.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
happy?
Yeah, we're done.
Okay. Fine. Jim, then Riza, and then Dana, and then Iggy, and then Dario.
Good morning, Mr. President. Jim Gomez, Associated Press. Sir, many are aware of your promise to put a closure on long-standing political issues that you inherited when you came to power. And I'm sure that many are want to be updated or want to know if you've come to a decision on some issues, like your plan to file corruption cases against your predecessor and top officials of the past administration. And number two, the issue of the burial of the late President Marcos.
With regards to filing charges, the best information or the latest information that I have is by November we will be filing charges. Yung as to go into the details, it's still being finalized as to which specification, which alleged crime was committed, etc., will be the first on the block. Okay, with regards to the Marcos burial, and in all honesty, and I think this, and I will have to communicate this to the Vice President. I apologize. He did do the study on my behalf. He had the recommendation, and it was recently called to my attention again. There are so many. We have so many victims of the martial law years, who have not gotten even a recognition formally from from our government that they were victims. They have not been accorded an apology. The compensation bill is still pending. And it really would be, I think, the height of injustice to render any honors to the person who was the direct mastermind of all of this suffering. So I think I am not sanctioning, not under my watch, sanctioning a burial for the late President Marcos.
Sir, Mr. President, can you give a little more details about, you said that charges will be filed in November. Just any idea of who will be on the receiving end of these charges?
You asked
and
my
what-
predecessor.
Okay, yeah.
So I said yes by November.
So, and about the Marcos burial, so what kind of burial will be that you will allow in terms of
I
the past
assume you're
president?
asking me if we will allow a state burial or
That's
any
right.
burial wherein the state will render some honors. And I think you cannot divorce what happened during the martial law years with the totality of his, of his public life. And it serves as a wrong message. It means the honors given to others of a similar nature to render the same to a person that has inflicted such suffering on our people after having promised to serve, to serve them.
Okay. Raisa.
Good morning, Mr. President. I'm Risa Robles from South China Morning Post, Hong Kong. Sir, my first question is with regards to a disclosure by former Senator Ernesto Maceda about an official who told you that there was some money he was being given, and you got angry because and you told him to give it back. Sure, sorry. Along with this, I have actually talked to another official of yours and who told me directly that he was offered several million pesos in cash to do something, but he turned it down. What I want to ask you, sir, is do you have any protocol or any SOP within your government that when a government official whom you have appointed is offered anything for any reason, what is the SOP they are supposed to follow? Are they supposed to tell you about, Sec, may 200 ka dito? I mean, when something like that happens, if they're given money, are they supposed to keep it and then hand it over to you or to anybody so that it can be properly receipted and given back?
Yung 200 to me is not in reference to any dialogue I've ever had with
No,
any
no.
member of my cabinet. Okay? Or 200 for you,
Yes.
for that matter. Let me put it this way. The people I got to help me in running this government are fully aware that that is a non-starter. You cannot entertain. I think I can rightfully claim that nobody has ever dared to offer me anything of that nature. They know that I will probably pursue charges even for the attempt. So with regards to the story that former Senator Maceda came out with, I don't know where that came from. But if ever I had somebody, I got information that somebody received anything, and I had enough evidence, then that person would not have gotten a sermon. He would have not just gotten fired. He would be facing charges. Right. And I think that is very, very clear to everybody that I have appointed that is serving. When I lose trust in a person, which means I have suspicions, but perhaps there's not enough evidence to warrant the filing of charges, that person is no longer part of our administration.
Just to clarify, sir, you said that if any of your appointed official gets money, you will not only sack him, you will charge him.
Assuming that there is enough evidence, because I will not tie up the courts with mere, di ba? Parang anybody who, in our system, if somebody gets nominated to a particular position or is talked about getting a position, you will have 1,001 detractors. Yeah. If we were to file charges on everything, all the insinuations, innuendos, etc., then we will never get anywhere. But at the very least, we will have an investigation done if somebody is suspected of doing something illegal, and the results of the investigation will tell us whether or not to file charges. In the evidence, will unearth evidence if there is, or will disprove the allegations if they're false. No, but again, I don't think that's a question mark as to anybody who's in my cabinet. No? That is very, very clear. The minute you even contemplate it, you had better resign rather than succumb to temptation, which you will be penalized for.
Sir, on a lighter note, the internet is filled with stories that you play video games. And in fact, during the height of the hostage-taking crisis, I'm following this up very closely because of South China Morning Post, that during the height of the hostage crisis, you were playing video games. So I would like to ask you directly, do you play video games, and if so, what kind? That covers computer, the whole gamut.
Can I answer you this manner? No? In specific day, the incident you mentioned, I think all you have to do is look at the calendar of activities that happened in Malacanang that particular day. You can interview people like ex-Director General Versosa of the PNP and ask him what time I called him up. You had a whole plethora of people subscribing to their oath of office that I was the officiating officer for. And I think you will be able to get every minute of that day accounted for. And of course, I didn't prepare that thinking that there would be a disastrous hostage situation in Rizal Park. No. So if you just do a little checking, you will see that there is no basis for such an allegation. And I'm sorry, I'm also human. I feel kind of insulted when I'm asked to disprove a non-event. And I think any of us, given the same situation, would also feel, why do I have to prove something that didn't happen? Yeah.
Okay, Raisa?
How about playing video games, sir? Do you?
I can't even go home to Tarlac anymore. And that
Okay,
is
that
my
answers
main
the question.
source of
Okay.
One last
relaxation.
question, sir.
Make it short, Raisa, please.
Yeah. In China, you said that your love life was Coke Zero. What are you looking for in an ideal, companion, woman, or wife? The whole nation is interested.
Shall I say that is not my priority at this point in time? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Dana, and then Iggy, and then Dario, and then Manny, and then Celerina, and then Chris. Go ahead.
Sir, Dana Batnag, GG Press, Japanese news agency. A while ago, you mentioned that our security forces are limited and that they're securing double the population that they used to secure. Given this, Sumitomo and Nickel Asia officials have decided to hire more ISKAAs to beef up their security because the number of army personnel is limited and can't be increased because of the budget limitations. Is this model something that you would suggest that other business companies who are also threatened by NPAs, do you think this is something that they should follow, that they should hire ISKAAs to improve their security?
Yung Nickel Asia does not have SCAs at the present time. They're about to hire. So it's not correct that they'll hire more.
Okay.
First time that they'll hire. The Claver Surigao Norte is not exactly that close to the capital or the major centers of population. And the That facility in itself, the area they comprise is something like 4,500 hectares. So it does anything that enhances security, deters criminal elements from embarking on their nefarious activities. So do we recommend it? In certain situations, no? Guided by, and this is evaluated by both the PNP and the AFP as to need. Nobody just applies and gets shall we say, an authority to do so. That has to be evaluated based on the threat analysis.
Tapos sir, kasi the NPA spokesman in the area, George Madlos, has said that the attack was a message to the investors. He said that there are two governments in the Philippines, one that is real and another that is emerging, and that investors are bound to fail if they ignore the emerging revolutionary government. In the light of this statement, are you considering implementing other changes in how to secure investors, or you think it's just a matter of beefing up the forces?
Certainly just beefing up the forces, but employing the right forces at the right locations. You proceed from a threat analysis. Threat analysis tells you how to manage the resources that you do have. Okay, so you'd expect a statement like that from their spokesman. His job is propaganda. But yung propaganda versus reality is very, very different. There are less and less areas that they are able to undertake such activities. In fact, they had to traverse the breadth of Mindanao to gain sufficient forces to do what they did. And that, of course, is also a failure on our part, not being able to detect such a sizable number. That is being corrected at the present time.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right, Iggy. Then Dario, you come over.
Good morning, Mr. President. Ignacio D. of the Daily Manila Shimbun. Two questions. Regarding the stimulus package, have your economic managers given you an estimate how much it could boost economic growth by first quarter of 2012?
I don't recall offhand what the briefing was in terms of the multiplier effect of this investment. Yeah, we don't.
Sir, and
we'll have to get back to you that because guess and be erroneous.
Sir, and then second question, there have been reports from some of your middle-level economic managers about a possible cut in the Philippine growth target for 2011. Could you confirm that a reduction is in the works?
We're still maintaining perhaps the low end of the forecast, but nobody, for instance, predicted that the tsunami and the earthquake would hit Japan, would disrupt 60% of our exports. Yeah, our exports are 60% from the semiconductor industries. And these have components that are sourced from Japan affected by what happened there. Our domestic car industry, for instance, also suffered a shortage of units for sale, not because there was lack of demand, but rather lack of supply. And of course, what happened in the Middle East also was not predicted when all of these numbers were being computed originally.
Finally, Mr. President, last Friday, Secretary Rojas outlined to us the pace at which projects which are up for PPP are reviewed, and it takes between at least 4 to 5 months. Since some of the launching of these big-ticket infrastructure items have been delayed, is there a need for government to try to speed up the period of deliberations, for example, in the NEDA ICC board and the submission of engineering works and feasibility studies?
We're reviewing the whole process, and we're trying to compress the time element involved. But at the same time, there's been a rethinking. Would it be more prudent for us to embark as originally announced with the wrong assumptions? What were the wrong assumptions? That we would not have access to other funds that can give us a hybrid PPP program instead of a purely PPP program. The biggest assumption was there would be practically nothing in the budget that could be utilized for these needed infrastructure projects. However, we managed to do quite a bit of savings. There is a significant reduction in the deficit. There is parang the acceptance for these two issues already of global peso bonds. That has given us the fiscal space to suddenly say, look, we can modify the partnership. It doesn't need to be purely the pure PPP form, but perhaps a two-step process wherein government can access concessional loans that will bring down the cost of the project dramatically and therefore reduce the burden on the people. So we are hoping that we get the needed infrastructure at the cheapest price possible or burden on our people. Necessity for all of the reviews.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Dario. All right, Kate, Senator Dario, Kate, go ahead.
Kate McGowan from the BBC. It's nearly now 2 years since the Maguindanao massacre.
Go into the microphone.
Yes.
Okay, is it on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. It's nearly 2 years since the Maguindanao massacre happened, and things still seem to be going incredibly slowly. There seems to be no end in this. Are you speaking actively to the judges involved to try and speed this up? How are you trying to get this resolved? Because it just looks like it's never ending.
I would love to talk to the judges involved, but the Constitution prevents me from doing so. They're an independent and co-equal body. If I tend to influence a judge in deciding on a case that is active in his sala, that is an impeachable offense. I've been working, however, on the Secretary of Justice, especially on the prosecutors under our control, to try and ask why we have not been moving faster. Because I did say that that would be one of the cases by which whether we are successful in providing justice or not to our people. So they have been exercising all the necessary steps within their purview to be able to expedite the whole process. But the sheer volume of witnesses involved, and of course the defense witnesses also that will be coming in, the number of people involved will really take its toll when you get all of their testimonies in open sala or in open court hearings.
Well, that's what I was going to go on to say, because, okay, obviously this is something for the judges to decide, but it's internationally, this case is very much a test of the Philippines justice system. And what can you, as the president, do to just speed things up and make a real difference with it? Because at the moment, not much seems to be happening. And a lot of the witnesses and a lot of the families are saying they're trying to be bribed off, and that's public knowledge, but not much is actually being done about it.
Well, one thing that I inherited is an average of 6 years adjudication for cases in our country. And one thing that really caused shock in me was when I asked exactly how do prosecutors get promoted in our prosecutorial service. And when I was a Senator of the Republic, I was told in gist their ability to move papers from one desk to another was the main criteria in their getting promotions. So under my instructions, the Secretary of Justice has reformed that process and said, we are going to your win-loss records. Cases that you deemed proper to file before the appropriate courts and you lost will be counted against you when it comes time to judge your performance. So your performance is actually, did you secure convictions for the cases that you deemed worthwhile of filing in court? And that is a transformational process that the Department of Justice is undergoing at the present time. And I think the Secretary of Justice, if she would be present, would tell you that perhaps every second time that we get to see each other, and that is practically every week, that I ask about what is the status of the Maguindanao massacre case, amongst the other things that she's been tasked to handle also.
How long do you and she estimate that it's going to take?
That is so difficult to estimate when there is a party not under our control that ultimately will make the render decisions. But we are doing everything that is in our power to expedite the process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Go ahead, Serena.
Good morning, sir. Celerina Monte from the Daily Manila Shimbun. Sir, sorry, I have to go back on the bone issue because many incidents, including tragic incidents, have already taken place, including the alleged suicide of one of the Ifugao tribe leaders because he was allegedly being haunted by some of his relatives whose bones were stolen. And before, when we interviewed you in, I think, November, you mentioned that if it will be proven that those bones that were collected were really Filipinos, you will ask for their repatriation. But the problem is those bones are already being cremated in Japan. And right now, these victims, the Ifugao tribes and the Mangyans in Mindoro, I think there were also some in Palawan, they're asking the government's commitment that they should be given justice, that the government should help them. So can I get your reaction on that, sir?
You're more conversant of the topic than I am, Celerino.
Because, sir, I went there. I interviewed them.
I intend to go to Ifugao, but not on the issue of the bones. But the last time that I checked formally with the Secretary of Foreign Affairs was I was informed that there were supposed to be DNA tests that were to be conducted, and we were awaiting the results of the same. I have not gotten the formal results of this DNA test. So the first question that was asked earlier, I had to answer on the basis of raw reports that I was getting of what the contents of the report were. I was informed that the results were inconclusive. And when it's inconclusive, how do you demand a right when you have not yet proven the right to reclaim the remains of Filipinos? So any other comments on this matter is pure speculation on my part, and I think that would be irresponsible. So as soon as the Secretary of Foreign Affairs comes back, and he's supposed to arrive, I think by tomorrow, I will ask him to personally look into this, and together with, I think it's the National Historical Institute who is also handling it for us, the National Museum. But I think I'd better call them all in to settle this question once and for all.
Okay, sir. Sir, on another issue, the government is pushing for a special track of peace talks with the NPA, NDF. So what's the development on this? And are we expecting a resumption of the peace process with the MILF and the NDF before the end of the year?
I cannot talk about the contents of the special track, because that is actually being negotiated at this point in time. We are not yet at the stage that we can have a document that we can sign. But I think I cannot add anything to what I've already stated, that the proposals emanating from them are eminently doable. Now, I'm sure you understand that there are quarters that would not want us to achieve peace, who have found a life in continuing bloodshed to be their liking. So is it prudent on our part to start revealing all of the details of all of these agreements at this point in time when we have not yet concluded the same? Will we increase the risks to the people who are involved in the process by revealing who they are? I don't think that would be correct on my part.
So when can we expect the resumption of the peace talks? Is it soon? Or
Secretary Deles of the peace process tells me nods and says soon.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Manny. Manny and then Chris. Then Luis, and then you. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. President. Manny Mugato from Reuters. Sir, in the past, the Philippines has been very hard on Myanmar, especially in pushing for the democratic roadmap in the country. Now there are indications that Myanmar will release their political prisoners. Can we get your comment on that, and how would it help Myanmar in hosting the next summit?
But two topics, But on the first topic, there was, I understand, I read somewhere that there was a gathering by people to commemorate. But anyway, the rally was not dispersed. So that is a hopeful sign. Aung San Suu Kyi has not been re-incarcerated. They have responded, the things that they told us would happen prior to the last elections and in the release that would happen after the elections have come through. So there seems to be some opening of democratic space within Myanmar, and we will encourage them to do so. We have talked to them on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly of 2010. We brought some of these matters up again in one of the ASEAN fora with Prime Minister Tan Shin. And not in ASEAN, I think that was APEC pala, in Yokohama. So, and the things that they did commit to do seems to have been happening already. So we would like more and more of that. The same, our appeal basically was a broader dialogue within their own communities produces stability, and stability in one component of ASEAN produces stability within the entire region.
So would the Philippines support Myanmar in hosting the next ASEAN Leader Summit?
I don't think that, let me check. It's 2 years. Check on the details. No? I don't think they're the next schedule as in next year. No,
Yeah.
they're still subject to negotiation. So lest I make a mistake, let me consult with the Foreign Affairs Department.
Sir, going back to the
Huwag
West
naman yung
Philippine
bones, ha?
Sea, South China Sea
Okay.
issue.
Okay.
Sir, in the past you were telling us that apart from the ITLOS, there are other avenues the Philippines is pursuing to for its claim in the South China Sea issue. What are these 3 or 4 other avenues you are?
There are actually, I think, 6 in total. But let me instruct the Secretary of Foreign Affairs to go through each one. No? Yung the nuances of diplomacy. Sometimes I'm not. I might put in a wrong word here or there, but I think it will be in the best position to explain each particular step. Number one, what are required for each of the steps to be undertaken. Which of the 6 routes, no, and the status of our efforts towards those 6 channels at this point in time.
But all these 6 steps are based on the UNCLOS.
And various other agreements, no, that we are both signatories to, if I'm not mistaken. No? But,
Thank you. Thank you.
provisions.
Chris, go ahead. Chris, and then this side, Frank and...
Yeah, Tres Reyes from the case, sir. I'd just like to ask, you said you were asked about the GDP growth for this year. Which is our target now? Is it 5 to 6 or 7 to 8?
5 to 6.
So we have actually revised, because we used to use 7 to 8.
Again, that was before everything that has transpired.
Right, so now we're using 5 to 6, and when you say it's the lower end, it's around 5.
I am not sure exactly what will happen in Europe next week.
So
we are maintaining 5 to 6.
So it's still 5 to 6.
Still, okay. It's a range.
And for 2012, what is the GDP growth target for 2012?
One second. Yeah, this time we're still maintaining the 5 to 6 also for 2012.
For 2012, okay. Sir, just one other thing regarding the Philippine Airlines issue. What is the...
Which of the issues of Philippine Airlines?
Well, just the mess that it's in right now, and how
which one?
you expect to normalize the Philippine Airlines operations so that people can get on planes and get there on time and normalize operations.
Well, PAL told us that they are ready, and I think something like 2 weeks to be able to normalize everything, but I'll have to check. No? That was, of course, before the Supreme Court decision recalling their decision, which might have negative repercussions also. So we will perhaps inquire as to when that will be solved also, or resolved. But again, when the issue with Palea was parang 2 weeks after September 30, if I remember correctly, was when they expected normalization.
Yes, that's acceptable to you. I mean, the government is not taking any more steps to make it, normalize sooner, or that to prevent any further complications regarding the labor role, so that we can, in fact, look forward to no more interruptions between the time.
We were confronted with one central issue. The airline is in distress. They need a reformatting of their corporation to survive. What is the national interest? And it defined the national interest thus. No? There are 10 million Filipinos overseas. With what has been happening in the Middle East, one would want airlines capable of going to the Middle East to fetch our citizens. No? We could not parang allow the national flag carrier, and the only other airline capable of reaching those destinations to become non-entities and lose that ability to, if there was a need, to repatriate our countrymen. Okay. So we would like to sympathize with those in Palaya who were going to get into their collective bargaining agreement. No, but the interests of the 10 million outweighed the thousands, the 2,000 or so that were affected by Palaya. There is no perfect solution to this mess, but it is part and parcel of the changing realities of the economic situation in the entire world. Okay, what are we doing? We were not apprised that there would be a recall of the decision with regards to the FASAP union of PAL. And we will hopefully not encounter more disruptions because of that. And we will appeal to the Supreme Court, perhaps to hasten the processes.
Right, so we will just wait for 2 weeks because that's the expectation that things will normalize in 2 weeks and there's nothing.
The other factors there are we have pocket open skies for practically everywhere except for NAIA, which adds more airlines that can service our needs.
Okay, just one last other, regarding Terminal 3, is there a decision coming up soon as to, who is Takenaka going to repair whatever needs to be repaired, and when is NAIA 3 finally going to be fully operational?
Well, we just finished the decision wherein the valuation was given by the regional trial court. No? I understand that we have already placed in escrow with that court the value that the government owed Piatco. Now, who is to finish construction? I have reservations with regards to who actually built it to begin with that had several issues, amongst them yung apron on the tarmac. That is the DOTC is actually in charge of this whole thing. They will check and re-qualify everybody to finish that particular terminal at the soonest possible time.
So there's no time frame as of now?
But there is a time frame, I think, for, it escapes me right this moment exactly what quarter next year. But I think the second quarter next year is the target for full operations.
For full operation, second quarter of 2012?
Second quarter of 2012. But don't hold me to that, no. I have to check my notes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Frank.
Frank from Guangming, China. In September, Mr. President, you made 3 successful trips to China, US, and Japan. So, if using one word to describe your impression to each of the trip, what's the words you will use to describe the trip?
Besides tiring?
And that's my next question, actually.
Wait, just one question first. Go ahead.
We are very thankful for the way we were received by all the leaders that we met in various sectors. Hopefully, we were able to convey that the Philippines is ready to assist all of these countries that we have had such good relations with for a very, very long time in navigating these very turbulent economic conditions at present. So we would not want to be further burdens on anybody, and hopefully we were able to communicate that.
And then my next question, it would be tiring instead of enjoyable to travel such a lot within 1 month. So how do you keep yourself refreshed and in high spirit despite such a high pressure?
Yeah, yesterday, going to, I think it was the PICC that I went to, there was this young family young family that I saw on the street who visibly were not that well off, but they had smiles on their faces and they were waving so enthusiastically at me, knowing that the convoy that I was in was passing before them, including their very young offspring. So whenever I see our people appreciate all of the efforts that are being done on their behalf, that sustains me. That makes it all worthwhile.
Okay, the last question. So, Mr. President, can you give us, the foreign media, some suggestions? What do you think the foreign media should portray more about Philippines or portray more accurately about Philippines? What's your
I
suggestion?
think it will take us 1 week to be able to do that.
Whatever.
But initially, there are so many investment opportunities in the country. A lot of them really, shall we say, left in the potential stage. Amongst them, for instance, in tourism, there is an island called Balabac of the southern coast of Palawan, which I understand is at par, has beaches that are at par or not even better than those offered by Boracay. Look at coconut water, for instance. I had to go to America to find out that we are exporting coconut water to America. That was really educational on my part because I thought there was no way to preserve coconut water. Then they did find out in terms of packaging, etc. And to find the nutritional value of the same. This redounds to quite a significant increase in the livelihood opportunities of our countrymen engaged in coconut farming. Various facets of aquaculture also. There are so many things actually that can be reported in this country. But if we're fixated on on so many trivialities, amongst them my love life.
Okay, thank you.
Doesn't really redound to anybody's good.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please, quickly. And then Yano-san. After you. Go ahead.
Somebody else. I can read this.
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning. I'm Simone Orendine. I'm here for Voice of America. The BPO industry is projecting that there's going to be a lot of hiring coming up in the year ahead, and they're talking about a shortage of skilled worker or shortage to fill those positions in the tens of thousands. And you have talked, and your budget secretary have talked about education being a real priority in the budget. Can you be a little more specific about how the needs of the BPO industry would be addressed within this budget? I understand there's school construction going on. There is the consideration of going 12 years of school. But how, I guess in the immediate future, will this have an impact on this hiring in the BPO industry?
Can I just read the font is font 6, I think. Immediately, TESDA, the part of the education sector that handles vocational training, has been tasked to really increase their training for those who have who barely missed the cutoff point. I think, to explain it properly, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 500 million pesos has been allocated this year for TESDA alone. Now, there is a review actually for the entire educational system, wherein what we're trying to do is there is a constant mismatch. Monthly, something like 50 or 60,000 jobs are left unfilled because people with the necessary skills are not available. So I've instructed the educational sector, which is CHED, DepEd, TESDA, together with our Department of Labor and Employment, to get together, use the forecasts developed by DOLE, to be able to gear and motivate our students to enroll in courses that will provide jobs by the time they graduate. TESDA and the DepEd has been tasked also to come up with skills trainings program for people who just finished high school to be able to have marketable skills already at the point in time that they graduate from high school. Then, get the total number for education. The exact numbers for education, the education sector, but it has, again, been one of the biggest growing sectors of the proposed 2012 expenditure program.
So just to follow up, is the TESDA training then going to be able to address the needs of, say, the BPO industry, that sort of thing, or is that separate?
Yes, but there is also a need to develop the managerial talent that is actually, there's a more acute need for that. No? And the reason for that is it grows, I think the BPO industry grows between 20 or 30% per annum. We think it will be accelerating given that there will be other activities not previously part of our domestic industry that are forthcoming. Amongst the ones that have been mentioned to me are nurses who are outsourced also, who process claims for insurance, amongst other things. So that falls hand in hand with our surplus of nurses at the present time.
Is it, I don't know if this is a fair question, but then is it then kind of spread thin, what you have to work with? Is it enough to reach all of those positions that are indeed needed to be filled?
Well, some of them can be immediate. No? Those who undertook tests and barely missed the cutoff point will be assisted by this program by TESTA. But there are others that will have to be nurtured by the system, starting from even basic education, and that will be a long-term process. What we're saying basically is that we seek to correct the situation where our countrymen go into courses assuming jobs will be plentiful by the time they graduate because it's the in-course right now, only to find out that it doesn't exist. That is what we're trying to correct. But it cannot happen overnight. It is a process that has so many elements involved that will take time to be able to mature. So we're not saying that it will take us 4 or 5 years to effect radical changes in it, but we are going in that direction. Amongst the other things that are being done by the education sector is to close down courses or schools that have not produced the necessary competencies and diluted the abilities of the very competent ones.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yano-san. No, Yano-san first. Let's call those people who have... Go ahead, Yano-san. You. Yeah, yes.
Good morning. My name is Junichi Yano and the Japanese newspaper, Mainichi newspaper. So I want to ask about South China Sea issue, especially about the zone of freedom, peace and freedom issue. So how do you characterize and analyze why the other country didn't agree about the idea or hesitate to agree about the idea?
I don't think it would be proper for me talking about the other claimant countries to render my opinion as to their behavior. That I think is very undiplomatic. Mm-hmm. At the point in time when we want ASEAN centrality, I think I should be very conscious lest I hurt anybody's feelings at this point in time by trying to judge why they decided on the way they decided.
So how will you convince the other ASEAN countries about your idea?
I don't know, how do you convince them? I think the idea that a multilateral solution is the only solution to this. You have an area of the world's oceans claimed by so many countries. Now, if any two parties, claimants to the same, agree on something that excludes everybody else who has competing claims, then the others who are excluded will not feel bound by what has been agreed to. So we think the basic philosophy behind everybody getting on board, agreeing to how to resolve the issue, redounds to a solution that is binding, enforceable, and that will ultimately result in benefits to all parties in the dispute.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Oh, Melo and then Charmaine.
Thank you, Mr. Tabunyar. Mr. President, with all the calamities that we saw and we experienced, will you order a review of our food security programs? Will you consider more imports as far as rice is concerned, being a political commodity?
With the calamities that have befallen us, the 2 typhoons almost becoming 4, actually in succession, I think I was talking to Secretary Alcala the day after I visited Region 3, and he showed me various computations beginning with what we had in stock at the beginning of this year, which is about 1.5 million metric tons, which is good for Sorry, I don't have a calculator right now. But
45 days?
it's 34,000 metric tons per day assumed by the NFA, 31,000 assumed by the Bureau of Agricultural Statistics.
Yes.
Okay. So between what has already been harvested, what the NFA has had on hand, even with a 5% reduction in the remaining harvest, on top of the losses that were wreaked by Pedring and Kel, if I remember correctly, we will still have by the end of January or by January next year, inclusive of that which will be replanted this period, something like at the very least parang 90 days stock.
Okay.
And therefore, he was saying that there is no need at the present time to import beyond that which has already been imported. The ones that we authorized, 800,000, the deadline for that to come into the country was September. So we have that also on hand already.
Yes.
But again, the first 3 quarters have really had very, very good harvest, according to Secretary Alcala. That I was asking him already that if you actually base it on the 31,000 metric tons daily needs, then we are actually in surplus already at this point in time.
Yeah.
With what we have.
Mr. President, with the coconut water that you mentioned a while ago, I was with another media personality about a couple of days ago. We've been to Quezon. They're excited with the cocoa water industry, but they just wouldn't know which stage would investors be interested in the cocoa water. Is it the young coconuts or the matured coconuts? Because it will complicate the country's commitments of coconut oil. They have 18 oil processing plants in Quezon Province, Mr. President.
The way that there are 2 proponents already in the country, one in Mindanao, and I think the other one is in Quezon.
Or was it Camarines Sur?
That is about to be established, if I'm not mistaken. Now, in both of these existing plants, and their main products are copra and desiccated coconut.
Yes.
They said that both plants used to be wet because they just throw away the coconut water. Now, they originally sourced, these 2 companies sourced from Brazil, prohibitive price already for coconut water in Brazil. That's why they discovered the Philippines, and they said that both plants are now dry. So I'm not technically clear as to whether it's the young coconut or the older coconut trees that will produce the necessary water. My understanding is any coconut will produce the water that they put in Tetra Paks and export to,
Thank you,
America,
Mr.
amongst
President.
other countries.
Thank you.
Charmaine, keep it short because our time is running short.
Yeah, this is just a follow-up to your earlier response to the West Philippine Sea and the prospects of oil and gas exploration. And you said on areas that are disputed, you'd rather that Chinese investments there would you'd take a second look or slow down on having it offered to Chinese companies. I'd like to know, where does that fit then in your earlier position that I'm talking about the Reed Bank of what is ours and what is disputed can be jointly developed. So are we saying now that Reed Bank can be jointly developed, or as you said, it cannot be, we have to slow down on areas that are disputed?
If you look at the map, in the Spratlys, which is where most of the disputes are, is quite far from the Reed Bank. The Reed Bank never got into question until the promulgation of the 9-dash theory in 2009. So in Spratlys has been occupied, portions of it has been occupied by us since at least the 70s, discovered I think in the 60s or thereabouts. And then the other claimant countries also claimed. When Secretary Del Rosario visited China ahead of the state visit, he was proposing that can we keep areas in this, can we segregate areas that are in dispute and areas that are not in dispute? And our position is, on previous claims to the Spratlys, before the 9-dash theory came about, the Reed Bank, or direct-to-bank as we call it, was not part of the dispute. Now, if there is no dispute, exercise, and if we were just to fully exercise our rights under UNCLOS, we can actually explore it on our own. But that might heighten tensions, which would not want to happen. So, joint exploration still has to proceed from determining who has sovereignty of a particular area, who has responsibility for maintaining the ecological balance there, who gets the royalties emanating from such a project, who is responsible for anti-piracy, and so on and so forth. Without that settlement, how do you actually proceed?
But yeah, the Felix that is undertaking the service contract 72 in the Reed Bank has already said that they're open to anyone who had the best offer to join to develop the area for them. So even Chinese companies, what is the policy guideline then when we have this area also being claimed by China? And the nature of Chinese companies, they're quasi-government.
If Chinese companies participate undertaking a service contract we render, then that recognizes our sovereignty of the nation. We would have no issues there. We are not saying no to certain investors. No. All we're saying is who authorizes it should be settled first. Otherwise, it will just exacerbate the disputes. I think that should be very clear.
Okay, all right. Just one
Okay.
one last note, sir.
Dali, dali.
Yeah, I'm sorry, sir. On still on the last maritime legal experts meeting, the only positive thing that came out of it was that there was for the first time a discussion of the 9-dash line of China, and then all those who were present were not amenable to they were opposed to the 9-dash line. Of course, nobody accepted that. That was the only positive thing, but it was still short of endorsing the zone of peace of the Philippines. And it was perhaps because of the hesitancy of some of non-claimant members of ASEAN, especially there were 2 who were not there. Would you prefer that the claimant member states of ASEAN take a lead role in this multilateral approach that you wanted on the South China Sea issue?
I think that is automatic, that the claimant countries will have the interests to foster or to push along this process of settling the disputes. That's I think, commonsensical. The others who are not part of the dispute, who do not envision the necessity of freedom of navigation, for instance, who have land ties with the other countries in dispute, will feel perhaps it's not warranted that they embroil themselves in a controversy that does not do their parochial concerns any good.
So the ASEAN claimant should take the driver's seat rather than stick to an ASEAN centrality on the South China Sea issue.
Driver's seat in convincing the other members of ASEAN also. But at the end of the day, if you cannot agree on a particular course of action, then each country has to foster and defend its own rights.
Okay, one last, the last question by President.
Thank you, Mangabi. Mr. President, just follow up on your answer about the corruption cases being filed in November. Do we already have a figure of how much money was lost to corruption and other anomalies during the previous administration? And if charges are filed in November, do we expect a Christmas in jail for your predecessor?
I'm in a quandary as to how to answer that, no? Primarily because yung actual copy of the complaint, etc., is not yet before me now. And there are developments that are happening. There are, let's be realistic about it, yung witnesses might be gotten to from now until November. So I don't think it's prudent on our part to reveal any details as to which charges. And we're not even saying that it is necessarily a corruption charge that will be the first one that will be filed. No. But they're all in the ambit of yung misgovernance that has transpired. So I'm sorry, I think it will make our lives that much more difficult in securing witnesses, in really preparing for the case if we were to reveal too many details at this point in time.
Mr. President, sometimes in this forum, no, just wait, we had to end it. The moderator is given the option to ask a question or not, so I'd like to exercise that privilege this morning.
Kayo pa po.
Some years back, the presidency was very much out of your mind, far from your mind. You've been president for 2 years now. How do you like the job?
How do I like the job?
How do you like the job? How's it treating you?
There are still adjustments that have to be made. No? The degree of total lack of privacy is something that has to be, I guess it's really hard to, let me answer it this way. Things that I predicted would happen when I was first asked to run are happening, and perhaps some of them even to a worse degree.
Mm-hmm.
we really, I think, work extremely hard. And then at the end of the day, not too many media people are concerned about what we think are the important issues, but are more concerned with issues that I think are more of a trivial concern. So it does not serve as a motivation to work even harder on the things that we think are
I
important.
see. So I don't see you stressed out, or you don't show it anyway.
I pass it on to Ricky Carandang.
So you can easily finish your term and probably like it a little bit and possibly consider doing more for the country after that.
Ever since I entered public service, the only I guess motivator, the only thing I ever needed to keep on going was when I was a congressman, for instance, to go back home to the district and see the appreciation of the people that I promised to work for. When yesterday, chance encounter with that young family, not well off, and they seemed to be so appreciative of the things we were doing. That is enough for me. And when I get a reception like that, or even in Mandaluyong earlier in the day, then the 4 years and about 8 months remaining does not seem to be that long.
Where do you intend to bring this country after 4.5 years of you? What's in your mind?
I think it's already happening. No? When, for instance, I'm being castigated with freedom of information, but when we look at it, what have we actually withheld from the people at any point in time? And why do I harp on that? No, because previously, our people seem to be so apathetic already, not cathartic about issues that befell my predecessor's government. Now it seems there's a fixation to go on the opposite extreme, which is to find fault and nitpick as much as possible, and becoming, for certain quarters, quite an obsession. So, from if the choice is between apathy or being too much of a busybody, I think I'd rather accept the busybody concerned with what happens with the country rather than the apathy that happened not just too long ago.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. President, and thank you for being with us. Thank you.